Tech on ice, here we go. The temperature in the water isn't very cold today, but this is cold for some reason. Anyway, let's continue our series with getting started in tech, how to get into tech. We talked about, choosing what kind of tech you want to learn. So like what kind of apps you want to build or what have you. Then we talked about, what language or what frameworks you should be looking to have be your first language based on, that first decision you make. And then, last time we talked about like your learning journey and how you should go about figuring out what kind of content you want to consume as part of your learning. And this is going to be the last one because I think this is the not the getting started in tech, but how to continue in tech part of this conversation. And I want to talk a little bit about how you continue your learning. So let's just example wise, let's say I wanted to build mobile apps. I decided I was going to build apps for iOS, so I learned Swift or Objective C or whatever, or Objective Swift. Sorry, Objective C. Sorry, and then I consumed a bunch of content, a little bit of docs, a little bit of video, a little bit of blogging, what have you, and I was able to build like my first iOS app. Cool. So now the question becomes like, now what, right? Obviously, I'm staying away from like the how to get a job piece because I think that's very much your mileage may vary, and my advice might not be super helpful because I don't know like all the areas and how to get into all the areas of tech. I know how to kind of navigate the area of tech that I enjoy. But I think the biggest thing that we in tech, that we have, the skill set that we have, is that we're very curious people. And because of that, like we always want to learn new things. And I want to talk about like how you continue that journey. Because let's face it, if using my example, if you learn how to build iOS apps and that's all you know how to do, yeah, you can make you can be pretty successful in your career. But more than likely, you'll be asked to step outside of your comfort zone as it pertains to technologies. Maybe they'll ask you to build Android apps too. Maybe they'll ask you to build web apps. Maybe they'll ask you to build an API that your app uses. There's countless things. And some of those things are things that you might enjoy doing. Some of them you might not. But you still have to kind of learn them or learn how to navigate them. So, we talked a little bit about this in the last episode where it says like learning things that are tangential to the thing that you want to learn. Like if how, I think I used the container example, like how containers work and all of that. So when you continue our learning, we have to be very cognizant of the areas that our interests might scooch into. Interesting word choice, I think. For instance, right? I use the Android app example, right? Like maybe you like, oh, I've never been an Android developer. I've never had an Android phone. Like, why would I want to build an Android app? Well, if you're building an iOS app, more than likely there'll be an ask at some point to build an Android app. If it already doesn't exist, because Android has a large user base, right? So if you're building an app, you want to be able to make sure that as many mobile phone users or mobile device users can access the value that you bring with that app. So how you learn those new things is kind of similar to how you learn the old things, except one really important thing is that you have to be very firm in not wanting to fall back to the way that you feel comfortable. This is really important because when we learn new things, sometimes learning new things is hard. And, I can only speak for myself, but I'm a kind of a lazy person. So when I'm learning something new, I start to think about, okay, well, how would I do this in this other thing that I'm more comfortable doing? And I have to force myself to get away from that way of thinking because we want to learn how to build things in the way that we're tasked with building them. So I use the Android and the iOS example. Like maybe you build apps a different way in Android than iOS, for instance, right? So you can't immediately start building an Android app thinking, okay, well, how would I build this if I was building an iOS? That's helpful to think about like at a very high level, but like you don't want to continually fall back to the technologies that you're used to, because that's how you stagnate in your career, that's how you stagnate in your learning. And then, fast forward a few years and you're kind of out of date with what current tech trends are because you kind of stayed in your little bubble, which I can only tell you, like, as somebody who has almost fallen into it a few times, like, it's not great when you're out there looking for work or looking for a new career, and a lot of the skills that you have just aren't really, like, wanted at that exact moment because you've been focusing on technologies that maybe haven't um, accelerated as much recently. So that's my little quick advice for folks is, like, as you can, like, learning isn't doesn't have an end to it. It's a path that you continue on, and you can step off the path and do some stuff, but you always get back on the path. It's funny because my wife and I were watching, like, Agatha, the Agatha show on Disney, and they had this thing called The Road, which is basically you just walk along the road and then you're given trials, and that's kind of how I think of love learning. Is like it's a road, it's a path, and you step off of it, you have a trial being work, trial being anything that comes up in your life that stops you from wanting to learn at that moment, but then you get back on the road and you keep going. So hopefully um, that's helpful. I'm curious, like, comment down in the chat, in the comments, like, well, what was, like, the second technology you learned? Like, you obviously learned the first one, right? What was the second one that you learned? And was it because you wanted to learn it or because there was a requirement or you needed to do it for work? I'm curious. Anyway, like and subscribe like always, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Take care.